at best. Even the Silent Hill series, the crown jewel of all horror, while doing fairly well, it never really hit that AAA sales performance that Konami was used to seeing. This was the era of the Japanese passion project, before games were so safe with annual releases of titles that companies knew would sell. Back then, producers were much more likely to invest in stuff that was new and out there and different. That's why we got all of these Japanese horror games on PS2, despite there not being much a market for it at the time. The Silent Hill series, the Siren series, Kuon, Haunting Ground, Clock Tower, even Echo Night Beyond. But since these games all targeted such a niche audience at the time, none of them really managed to sell all that well, and over time, they all became very valuable. But there was one game that didn't just do poorly because of how niche it was, but also because of how controversial it was. It got banned in a lot of countries, including the UK, and the countries that it did get released in, it sold barely any copies at all. Over time, it became one of the rarest and most expensive games on the PS2. And that game is Rule of Rose. These controversies were mostly a result of widespread misinformation by publicists. The game's trailer implies animal abuse and children being buried alive, but despite the trailer showing hints of these things, the final game would explore these topics in ways much tamer and tastier than the public made it out to be. This wouldn't be the first or the last time that news outlets spawned moral panic based on limited information. Games like Night Trap and Mass Effect would both suffer similar scenarios.
Another thing that you mentioned is that how it's, has full graphic nudity. That's completely incorrect.
But even still, it was a very dark game, tackling subject matter that game developers at the time were quick to avoid. The problem is that if you're going to have these shocking things in the game, you kinda need something genuinely poetic to justify it all. A great example would be Silent Hill 2, but even that game didn't tread waters quite as forbidden as Rule of Rose. It didn't even review very well either. While the Silent Hill series was gathering critical acclaim, Rule of Rose bombed with the critics. That and the cover art definitely speaks very limited appeal for people at the time, but I think the biggest nail in the coffin for this game was that it released right when the PS3 was hot and new. This game came out 1 month before the PS3 in North America. As a result of many unfortunate factors, Rule of Rose was always destined to be one unlucky little game. The game was developed by a Japanese studio called Punchline. You might know these guys for also making Tulip, but that's the only other game they ever made under that name. They had a hard time finding a publisher for Rule of Rose. They originally had plans with Sony, who published it in Japan, but they had no plans on ever localizing the game, but luckily Atlas picked them up for the English releases. But even with the most obscure of games comes a cult following. There's plenty of people that claim there is something truly wonderful here, buried under all of the controversy and subpar gameplay. So, if there really is something here, I'd like to find it. So why don't we grab our shovels and start digging? Like a lot of horror games from the time, we get a trailer-styled scene before the title screen. This is mostly composed of CG scenes from the game, but there's some original bits mixed in there as well. We see the protagonist in all sorts of unfortunate situations, being tied up, falling into a coffin. These were likely the scenes that were included in the game's trailer that stirred up the game's controversy. But if there's anything important to take from the intro, it's the characters. We see a lot of the girls that we'll be dealing with throughout the game, as well as this strange man who seems to be stalking the main character. Ooh, I like the way it transitions into the title screen, which is hand-drawn and very dainty looking, but at the same time crude, as if drawn by a child in a fit of rage. The game starts with this grim narration explaining a story of a young girl who lost her parents and then was sent away, which transitions to a young child on a bus reading it instead.
A friend, the princess of the Red Rose, was always at her side.
On that bus is Jennifer, a 19-year-old girl from England, resting as she patiently waits for the bus to arrive at her destination. The kid approaches her, somehow calling her by name, asking if she'll read him the rest of the story. When the bus stops, the kid runs off, with Jennifer going after him, but the bus leaves once again before she can get back on, leaving her stranded in the middle of nowhere. Having nowhere else to go, she decides to give chase. Following him up a pathway, we then take a detour after hearing a dog barking, which brings us to a shed, empty of everything except a dog collar and a boarding pass depicting a giant fish. Further down the trail, we stumble across an orphanage, and things quickly start to get strange. Markings on the wall telling stories of a stray dog that eats children, and little kids outside wearing paper bags on their head beating a bloody bag. Using the boarding pass, Jennifer is for some reason given access to the orphanage, where she follows the boy into the attic. You're free to explore around first if you want, which is what I did, but it's really pointless because there's absolutely nothing to find, and it's just a good way to get lost. I ended up wasting half an hour just wandering around aimlessly, and then I couldn't find the kid because I didn't know what door he went into, so yeah, just stay on track here. Once you find the kid, he'll demand that you read him the end of the story. It explains that a club called the Aristocrat Club was formed at the orphanage, and because of which this little girl always found herself all alone. After hearing the cries of a dog again, we rush into the courtyard to find a shovel where we dig up a coffin. Inside of it, the bag the children were beating out front. The kids then sneak up on Jennifer and knock her into the coffin and carry her away against her will. We then wake up being taken hostage on a big airship, and we're told that we must make one offering to the Aristocrat Club monthly, or else.
Let the games begin, dear Jennifer!
I'm not really sure I can say this. I should really
That childish cackling is just... oh, that's unsettling. This is where the majority of the game takes place, all in this large Zeppelin. With no way to escape, since we're kinda miles up in the air, Jennifer has no choice but to play along with these twisted games. Gameplay is kinda like a really slow version of Silent Hill. You'll explore your environment, searching for items you'll need to progress and survive, and have the occasional enemy encounter that you'll deal with via awkward and clunky combat. A lot of people will be happy to know that the game does not use tank controls, and it doesn't really need them either, since the game's camera follows you like a typical third-person camera, though there still are times when the camera will suddenly change to a brief fixed angle, making the direction you're holding cause you to quickly go the wrong way, but it doesn't happen often enough to be a problem. There's no run button, so you'll have to explore the area at a fairly leisurely pace. I found the airship kinda difficult to navigate. Hallways can look really samey, and with the camera angles constantly changing, it's very hard to have a consistent sense of direction. The cramped map doesn't help either. Like, look at this. I don't even, that's just an overwhelming amount of lines, and I don't even know, man. You probably will be familiar enough with the map over time that you'll be able to navigate pretty easily, but for the better half of the game, I was just going in room after room after room, being like, yeah, this is the wrong room, this is the wrong, which one? Oh, it's that one, right. So what you're looking for here is whatever item the Aristocrat Club wants for that month. Your first goal is to find a pretty butterfly. In order to track down these items, you'll enlist the help of your faithful doggy Brown. You'll find the poor thing tied up and hanging from the ceiling. Jesus Christ, this game doesn't mess around. That's just horrible, man. What's with all these PS2 horror games and girls with dogs, anyway? I've noticed there seems to be a lot of those. If you want to find these items, you'll have to have your dog sniff something similar so he can track down its scent. For example, in the first chapter, you'll get Brown to sniff a dead butterfly, and that'll lead you to a collector's butterfly case. And then you'll get him to sniff that, and he'll lead you to the butterfly you'll need for the club. This is a pretty cool mechanic. You can even use it to track down items for survival, like health items, biscuits, scones, candy, you know, anything that you can eat that fits the theme of British children. Certain items will be able to sniff out certain items. As you find new stuff, your menu will keep track of what sniffs out what. So if you're looking for a specific thing, you'll be able to use the menu to be like, oh, this one will get me this one, so sniff this thing and go find it. There's also currency items like marbles and ribbons you can find that you can trade at the item box for even better health items. But it's really stupid how you have to individually offer every one. That's like 8 times you have to cycle through the menu and select the marble and then read a bunch of text. This should take 2 seconds, not 2 minutes. Searching for the main quest items does get a little repetitive. Most of the game just consists of following your dog somewhere, but it was something unique for its time that I haven't really seen done much in other games, so I didn't really mind that much. Whether you actually enjoy exploring this world or not, well, that'll depend on how invested you find yourself in this game's story. Unlike many other survival horror games that offer stuff like puzzles and fun combat and a lot of elements of survival, there's really not that much to this game. There's barely any puzzle solving, there's hardly any focus on survival, and the combat is incredibly basic. This is actually the weakest part of the entire game in my opinion. It almost gets it right, but it just doesn't. I'm all for wonky combat. You need that to have a level of uncertainty when it comes to defending yourself. I think Silent Hill 1, 2, and 3 do it best. But the idea should be that combat is a last resort, so when you force the player into gauntlets of enemies that you have to defeat with a combat system that you are clearly not meant to do this with, things get unfair and frustrating as hell. Like most of the time, it's best to run around these things, and that's a totally viable and somewhat risky option that can pay off well, especially when there's a bunch of them at once. But there's too many times when the game makes you stop and makes you fight a bunch of them and defeat them before it lets you move on. This combat system is designed to have you maybe defend yourself against one enemy if you have to. Having to fight 5 guys at once with it just doesn't work. The monsters are pretty freaky though, I gotta give it that much. I always thought the Grey Children from Silent Hill 1 were some of the freakiest enemies I've ever dealt with, so these things really struck a nerve with me personally. The first encounter with one is like that classic Resident Evil 1 moment, except on this very uncanny valley scale. When you're looking at the back of its head, it's like, does it just not have hair? Does it not have it? What? And then it turns around, it's like no. There's a couple of variations of them too. Some will have weapons, and others will have the heads of different animals sewed onto them, turning them into this grotesque chimera, each one with slightly different abilities. I really hated these pigs. They'll charge at you and knock you clean over, taking out like all of your health. And with the slow-moving character animations, it's sometimes impossible to dodge it. There's a variety of weapons you can find throughout the game, starting with this dinky little fork, some knives. I fancied myself a steel pipe guy myself. The range on it was a little bit better. There's even a gun you can find if you do this really cryptic side quest. If you have brown sniff of candy in this one very specific room, you'll find this perfume, and if you sniff that perfume, you'll find another, and if you sniff that one, you'll find another, and with that one, another. Offering all 4 to the aristocrat box will get you the key to a secret room. Where's this secret room? Well, you'll just have to find it. And if you find that secret room, you'll get a revolver. This is a pretty tucked away thing for something so bad. The gun sucks, man. It's got great range, yeah, but it just does hardly any damage at all. So little, in fact, that you're guaranteed to run out of bullets before you kill one thing with it. You're better off just using a melee weapon instead. Though it is really cool that you'll have Brown sniff the gun to track down more bullets. I like that a lot. That would have been a very cool thing if, you know, the gun didn't suck. I wish the range on these weapons wasn't so freaking horrible. The hitboxes just are not where they should be. And for the enemies, well, their range is unparalleled. There's been so many times that I clearly was not even close to them, and somehow they're hit connected. This is an even bigger problem with the boss fights. These are the worst boss fights I have ever dealt with in a survival horror game. I say that with utmost honesty and absolutely no exaggeration. The first one's with this adult guy that the children tied up, and good lord, this guy had some range. Look at this. He did not hit me. That thing did not make contact with me, not even close. This is the frame I took damage, so I guess the second he starts that animation, the hitbox just goes right here. I was beside him, not even in front of him, yet it was enough to send me flying to the ground with great impact. Are you kidding me? And then I have to wait for this extremely long getting up animation to finish just so he can hit me again while I'm still helpless. It's literally impossible to react to this. He is so fast and you are so slow. He's so fast, in fact, that he hits you before he makes contact with you. 2 times he got me in a permanent stun lock, and I got a game over because of it.
It's no use!
Your attacking animations take way too long to finish, so it's nearly impossible to get a hit on him and duck out before he can get a hit on you as well. The only way to win these fights is either by luck, or if you track down a bunch of health items first and just tank through it. But that's not even half as bad as the mermaid boss. She hangs down from the ceiling at random, so fast it's way too hard to react to it, and she excretes this disgusting bile or vomit or something, and if you're stepping in it, it drains all of your health in seconds. And since the turning animation is so clunky and awkward, you actually can't walk away from it without first taking a step into it. Like if you push the stick away, Jennifer takes a step into it first before turning, and of course doing that, it gets you in a stun lock. So no matter what you do, your health is going to be ticking down to 0. She takes so much damage before you beat her too. This fight lasted 15 solid minutes. That's 15 minutes of painstakingly chipping away at her health when a single unfair mistake could kill me in seconds. This boss was likely one of the points of controversy as well. I mean, they're already pushing it having you attack a child with a weapon, but having her mutilated and hung from the ceiling like that, that's just... man. And like I said earlier, I'd be hard-pressed to imagine they could even warrant this kind of thing without some sort of legitimate story reason, so let's get into that a little bit. There's a sort of hierarchy created by these orphans, the members of the aristocrat club at the top, with Jennifer at the very bottom. She's the new girl after all, and as a filthy lower-class orphan, as the other girls have labeled her, she's subject to torment and straight-up torture in some scenes. They even spread rumors about her dog, claiming that it kills and eats children. Because of this, nobody wants to go near her, and it becomes impossible to make friends. There's another lower-class girl named Amanda who's always competing with Jennifer, desperately trying to escape the social status her peers have given her. She's two-faced, being nice to Jennifer when it benefits her, and stabbing her in the back whenever she needs to.
I had no choice. They would have hurt us both, wouldn't they?
Amanda, oh boy. Amanda is a fascinating character. She is an example of what following the rules of a broken and unfair society can do to a person. She acts unhinged at times, lashing out, begging for forgiveness, doing things that don't make any sense. She's a broken pile of emotions, and she has no idea what to do with them all, other than lock them away in hopes that they won't keep her from escaping the lower class. And it just so happens you can find the key. I think this is optional, I just happened to stumble across it, but the key to Amanda's diary, oh boy. Reading through this, hearing what was actually going through her head during every interaction you had with her over the months, you see her desperation. It's depressing, really. And at the end, there's this cute little animation of an angel flying away that you can flip through the pages to watch. That's exactly what Amanda is, a girl who just wants to sprout wings and fly away from this hell that she has to live in. But as it goes on, it gets cruder and cruder until it's just a pile of scribbles. This society's toll on her affected something she was genuinely talented at, as if this one tiny detail is a social commentary in itself, criticizing the society we live in for breaking people and taking away the things that they're good at. This was something that I could, oddly enough, really relate to. I went $30,000 in debt and spent a year and a half of my life going to film school because I wanted to become a filmmaker. I learned everything I could. I was really good at it too. And the very week I finally finished my classes, our government cancels the film tax credit of the province I live in. That meant no more film jobs where I live. That meant I could not find a job in the film industry. Right when I thought I finally found something I was really good at that I could do for a living. Society took it away from me. Just like how the aristocrat club's toll on Amanda's mental health took away the thing she was good at as well. A society run by children is never a good idea. The game surely takes a lot of influence from Lord of the Flies, but it's a very different spin on it. Instead of pure happenstance landing these children in a situation where there are no adults, the children here actively remove the adults. In some seriously disturbing scenes, we see the children beat the adults to death, and it's so interesting that these scenes are accompanied with these juvenile stock sounds, as if to convey that these acts of terror and brutality are motivated by such childish goals and desires. And it's also very interesting that Jennifer is considerably older than these children. She's 19, she's a legal adult. What is she doing here? Being bullied by children half her size? There is one kid that's actually very kind to Jennifer though, this blonde girl named Wendy. You don't see her very much, she's always sick and bedridden. The only friend Jennifer has is never there for her. What a lonely, unlucky little girl. That's the kind of language this game uses, referring to the children as princes and princesses, as if it's all just a fairy tale for children, being re-experienced as an adult, just to realize how horrible it all truly was. Every chapter of the game begins with another storybook, having you find the final page of it at the end. It's likely that these storybooks all represent something that's happened in the past. One of the more grim ones describes a stray dog that came and ate all of the children at the orphanage. Every story will remind Jennifer of a promise she made to somebody long ago, and writes it down on a chalkboard so she won't forget. These storybooks are always given to you by either Gregory, that strange old man wandering the airship, or the young boy from the bus. One chapter has you suddenly in Gregory's house for some reason. He kidnaps Jennifer and locks her in the basement before Wendy comes along and frees her. But then in the next chapter, you're suddenly back in the airship. With the seemingly nonsensical pacing, it's heavily implied that what we're seeing here in this game is not something literal. Think Silent Hill, the town taking what's inside your brain and turning it into something physical and horrible that only you can see. It seems like this game's story is a symbolic retelling of something, rather than a real and literal series of events. That would explain why Jennifer is so much older than the other orphans, as if she's reminiscing on something that happened a long time ago, instead of all of this happening to her there and then. And with all of that said, we're starting to get into spoilers. Skip here if you'd like to avoid the spoilers. There's a lot of value in playing this game without knowing how it ends, so if you were even remotely interested in playing this for yourself sometime, I do recommend you skip this part. Piecing together the game's story is definitely the game's main appeal. I'm also going to throw out a quick warning here. The subject matter is a lot to handle, so if you've got a weak stomach, I'm just warning you, it's not pretty. So, the last chapter has you returning to the orphanage, Brown goes missing, and then you find out that the Aristocrat Club beat him to death. It turns out that the girl behind the club, the one responsible for all of Jennifer's torment, was Wendy.
Wendy's 4 for 4 just got better.
No, not the burger, the blonde girl.
This is where Jennifer puts her foot down. You can bully her, you can torture her, but now they just took away her only friend. Jennifer finally stands up for herself, and interestingly enough, Jennifer appears much younger in this scene, as if it's the only literal part of the game, implying that the rest is her as an adult re-experiencing things from when she was this age. Remember that ticket for the Zeppelin and the airship that the entire game took place on? Jennifer was on that Zeppelin with her parents when it crashed, killing everyone on board. Everyone except Jennifer. This Gregory guy then found Jennifer in the wreck and kidnapped her because she looked just like his deceased son, Joshua. We find a bunch of notes and newspaper clippings that hint at this during the chapter that takes place in Gregory's house. One that really stood out to me is so subtle. It's when Jennifer can't take her eyes off of this toy Zeppelin that just crashed into the floor. We also see that Gregory's got a gun, even pointing it to his own head at times, likely considering suicide after losing his son. This chapter is called The Gingerbread House, and there's a drawing by Wendy on the wall of the sick room of a gingerbread house, but with a big gun in the middle. This was clearly something that Wendy knew about, and it was clearly not a safe place for Jennifer to live. Wendy, living at a nearby orphanage, found Jennifer, mistaking her for a boy. Gregory would dress Jennifer up like Joshua as some sick method of reproducing what he lost. Because of this misconception, Wendy found herself falling in love with Jennifer, thinking that she was Joshua. The two had a bit of a relationship even after the realization that Jennifer was a girl. Wendy then freed her from Gregory's house and invited her to stay at the orphanage instead, even stealing Gregory's gun as they ran away. The two girls were very close, their relationship growing more and more romantic over time, but then Jennifer found a stray puppy and started spending more time with it than she did Wendy. Wendy recognized this as Jennifer breaking the promise she had made to her. Everlasting true love, I am yours. Wendy grew jealous and spread rumors of Jennifer's dog eating children. She then created the Aristocrat Club to fill the empty void of attention that Jennifer once gave her. Using her power as club leader, she got the other girls to be mean to Jennifer in hopes that she would turn to Wendy for consolation. Instead, Jennifer grew up in a home that mistreated her every single day. She was bullied, beaten, teased, and tormented by her peers, all because Wendy didn't get her way. So, since Jennifer clearly wasn't losing any interest in this dog, Wendy finally decided to get the other girls to kill it, resulting in the scene where Jennifer finally confronts the Aristocrat Club, even physically assaulting Wendy over it. I mean, I can't really blame her. She literally killed Jennifer's only friend. That's messed up, man. With Wendy then dethroned, the aristocrats appoint Jennifer as their new leader, but then one day, something absolutely horrid happens. Wendy one day returns to the orphanage with Gregory, disguising herself as Joshua to manipulate him. This was a guy who kidnapped a girl to replace his dead son. Somebody as unstable as that could very well be twisted by somebody using that image. Wendy thought that Gregory would scare the other orphans into respecting her again, but that's not what happened. Instead, Gregory murdered every single child at the orphanage, including Wendy. It turns out the stray dog that gobbled up those kids wasn't Brown at all, but rather a deranged Gregory stripped completely of rational thinking and manipulated by a rotten, jealous little girl. And this is the final boss, Gregory, the stray dog. After the fight, there's a scene in which Wendy gives Jennifer Gregory's gun before Gregory claims Wendy's life as well. We then enter the second phase of the fight. We can equip the gun and use it to kill Gregory, but doing that gives you a bad ending. It's just like, and Jennifer was all alone again, and then we get the credits and it sucks, so don't do that. What you've got to do is wait for Gregory to get on his knees and reach his hands out, as if asking for something. If you give him his revolver, he'll tell Joshua he's sorry before taking his own life.
I'm sorry, Joshua.
Doing the final fight this way will let you play the final chapter, a flashback to when Jennifer was a young girl at the orphanage. We get to see a relationship with Wendy starting to bloom. Also, we find Brown as a puppy in the shed. It turns out that Jennifer also made a promise to Brown. I'll protect you forever and ever until I die. A promise she couldn't keep because she didn't keep her other promise to Wendy. In the end, the unlucky little girl lost everyone around her yet again, and once again, she was left all alone. Damn, that is a plot. I hope I got all of the details right. It's implied that Jennifer is simply re-experiencing these memories in a jumbled up manner as a young adult, combining her experience on the Zeppelin with her experience at the orphanage. They both had the same conclusion, after all. I'm sure there's several different ways you can interpret a lot of things in this game, but I'm pretty sure that's the general narrative they're trying to convey. It's a little tougher to piece together than some other horror games I found, so hopefully I didn't get too much wrong. But either way, it's definitely one of those games where you notice all of the little details once you replay the game. That boarding pass you found in the shed at the very beginning, for instance, using it to enter the orphanage, it represents the start of history repeating itself. Jennifer watched everyone around her die in the Zeppelin as she would once again at the orphanage. She's got a ticket to ride, and it's not fair. Rule of Rose has a brilliant narrative. It's one part Silent Hill 2 and one part Lord of the Flies. It explores the decay of the human psyche when subject to broken promises, petty revenges, and a society fueled by childish rage. I think the shock value was justifiably used. The game definitely wouldn't have been what it was without it. I'd say the game is definitely a lot more disturbing than it is scary, but being disturbed is an integral part of the experience. But of course, this wonderful, wonderful narrative is buried deep under piles of unimpressive, kinda boring, and sometimes infuriating gameplay. How much you can tolerate all of that, well, that'll probably rely on how invested you find yourself in this story. By the end of this game, I was feeling so many different things. I was overwhelmed with emotions that I just didn't know how to decode, so once I finished the game, I just had to, you know. Keeping that tradition that was popular around the PS2, you get some big, fat, fun goodies to play with on your second playthrough. There's costumes you can unlock, each with their own unique weapon. There's the typical Japanesey staples like the maid outfit and the nurse outfit, but then we have the octopus. If you find this specific hidden item during your first playthrough, you'll unlock this goofy octopus costume. It is the most ridiculous thing, and I thought the magical girl outfit from Silent Hill 3 was extra. Oh my lord, this is so much to handle. There's also some bonus collectibles you can get, like records that have the game's soundtrack on it, and film canisters that contain the game's cutscenes. However, both finding and using them is incredibly obtuse. To get the first record, you gotta have Brown sniff a scone in this very specific room, and you have to sniff that one to find the next, and sniff that one to find the next, and that to find the next, and so on and so on. You can't just sniff any single one and have Brown lead you to the nearest one. No, you have to painstakingly do them in order. It's the same deal with the film canisters. You get the first one by having Brown search for an oddly specific item that you probably wouldn't even really think to search for, and then you have to go down the line one by one. These things are super missable too. The second film can is found in Amanda's room, and that room is only accessible in one chapter early on in the game. If you miss that, you can't get any more for the rest of the entire playthrough. I suppose it's more so something you're supposed to stumble upon rather than something you deliberately seek out, but then why make it so you have to get them in order, with only each specific one letting you get the next? You should be able to find the first one and then sniff that to find the rest in any order. Even using these things to watch and listen to is a pain in the ass. You can only do it in the final chapter in these two rooms? Why not have a menu at the title screen or something? This really could have been handled better. What am I even doing? I'm criticizing the design of the bonus collectibles in a game that's already riddled with bad game design. If you play the game, I'd recommend you just ignore this stuff. I'd also recommend that you play the game on an emulator or something, because this is one of the most expensive PS2 games. Right now, during the making of this video, North American copies go for $220 American dollars, lowest. PAL copies can sometimes be a little cheaper, but it's really not a game you should pay hundreds of dollars for. When I'm talking about games in the show, I always track down a legitimate copy so I can have my reviews be as accurate as possible and for the sake of proper documentation. I never emulate stuff on this show. But if you just want to play it, then like by all means, emulate the crap out of it, dude. Accessibility is very important, and if the only legal way of playing something is by spending hundreds of dollars, well, that's just not fair at all. I suppose it's worth outlining some other things I think the game does well, like I really like how Brown doesn't have any collision, so he never gets in your way when you're trying to go into a door, especially when using him to find stuff. I also like how the enemies have puddles of blood and specific cries that occur when you land a killing blow, which gives you the proper feedback so you know which enemies have been defeated. The graphics are pretty good, all the models look fairly decent. Primitive photorealism on older hardware can often come off pretty badly, but like the big budget studios like Konami and Capcom, they pulled it off very well. And of course the soundtrack, oh god man, it is a joy to listen to. It's beautiful, and it fits the tone of the game exceptionally well. And of course the atmosphere, that haunting whirring of the airship as you navigate each corridor, it sets the mood quite nicely. But yeah, I guess in conclusion, it's not a very good game at all, but there is in fact a delicate and wonderful story to dig up here, under the piles of mud that is bad game design. Man, if any game needs a remake, it is Rule of Rose, man. Redo it with better gameplay. Just have a better vessel to tell this story. It is in desperate need of it. Not to use such a cliche euphemism, but this game really is like a rose. It's something beautiful, but actually getting it to the vase so you can admiring it, actually handling it is like ow, 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 ow.
I should go to bed. Somebody's watching. Who's watching? And why don't you interact? I should go to bed. It's getting late. I'm not sure if I can do something else right now. I'll come back later. Let's save.